Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And today we're going to talk about the Week 10 starts and sits. We're going to go over each game. Going to let you know which games are fantasy graveyards, which ones are going to be fantasy blowouts, and which ones are going to be fantasy gold mines. You definitely want to check it out. Here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. Greetings from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We're going to go through all the games for Week 10. Going to let you know what players are good to start and which are good to sit. But before I do that, if you could, please give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment, share this with your friends, and of course, subscribe. All those things help me out with that YouTube algorithm, and I do very much appreciate it. So thank you right to begin the show. So one thing I want to say before we go into the games, just real quick, I record this on early Wednesday morning. And there are lots of things that can happen between now and when the games actually happen on Sunday. Like last week when I did my show, Aaron Rodgers was totally fine, and OBJ was still a Brown. And then, of course, after I recorded the video, both those things changed. And so, of course, those sort of situations are going to adjust who I would put in as starts and sits. So I just want to throw that out there right now. If you're like, whoa, I can't believe you recommended Green Bay last week. Well, I was recommending Green Bay with the expectation that it was going to be Aaron Rodgers being the quarterback. So anyway, just with a grain of salt, please check the current status of these players before you put them into your lineup. So I just wanted to get that out there. So let's get right into the games. Now, for this week, I've got 3 games designated as fantasy graveyards. Now, fantasy graveyards are going to be low-scoring games where you're going to want to minimize your exposure and basically try not to play players off these teams, but if you have to, obviously you do. So let's just get right into it. My first graveyard game is this early Sunday game. It's the Browns at the Patriots. Both these teams are dealing with lots of issues right now offensively, and they're just not explosive offenses. These are very rudimentary ground and pound offenses. And the Browns have a situation because Nick Chubb is potentially out with COVID-19. So if Nick Chubb sits, D'Ernest Johnson is absolutely a start in his place. But the Patriots defense is very good against running backs. So again, temper your expectations. I think he's still worth the start. But when it comes to any other Browns players, the Pats defense is top 10 against wide receivers. It's top 5 against quarterbacks. Not a good situation. I don't like Jarvis Landry or any of the other receivers. I would sit them this week. Now, on the flip side, the Patriots are also having issues with their backfield because we have both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson dealing with concussions. So they are probably going to miss this week. And if they do, Brandon Bolden would be the start. Now, the Browns' run defense is very good. So, again, it's one of those situations where I'm not thrilled to start him. I would be much more inclined to try to put in someone else there. But if you need a player, Brandon Bolden would be a pretty good start for this week. The only Patriots I can really recommend would be Hunter Henry, who has been fantastic this year. And I think Jacoby Myers is going to bounce back nicely from last week's one-catch performance. The dude has been getting really good volume before last week. So I think it was just a game situational thing. He just had a bad game. It's fine. We'll brush it off. I still think he is good to start as a flex player. Next graveyard game. This one's surprising, man. Panthers at the Cardinals Sunday afternoon. Panthers obviously, have just been terrible with Sam Darnold playing, but now Darnold is probably out for a while. So now it's PJ Walker facing a team that's top 3 against the quarterback position. So not a good situation. He's going to be harassed all day. Really, the only players I can recommend on the Panthers would be you obviously start CMC, you obviously start DJ Moore, but that's it. That's really all you can start on this team. On the Cardinals side, they may be without Murray and Hopkins again this week. Both are still ailing, okay? The Carolina defense is also quite stout. I was kind of surprised at how good they are. They are 4th best against the run, 5th best against the pass. So the only players that I would really start on the Cardinals would be Connor, obviously. He got just amazing volume last week, and Christian Kirk. And I guess Ertz would also be a start, but just know that he's not getting a lot of volume. He's only getting like 5 targets a week. Not a great situation. So that would be my situation there. Obviously, if either, excuse me, geez, sorry about that. If either Kyler Murray or DeAndre Hopkins plays, I would play him. So we'll just have to see what happens during the course of this week. Final graveyard game is going to be the Eagles at the Broncos Sunday afternoon. Again, we've got good defenses here on both sides. The Broncos defense is second best against quarterbacks, third best against tight ends, and ninth best against running backs. I will still start Hurts, Goddard, and Howard, though. I'm not going to sit them. I think they're both they're decent options this week. Devonta Smith's volume has been all over the place. Past 4 weeks, 4 targets, 9 targets, 3 targets, 6 targets. Again, you can't trust that for fantasy. I would sit him, even though he gets the easiest matchup of the offense. The Broncos' pass defense is the weakest part of their defense. I still think it's a very, it's still a tough matchup. It's still 13th toughest overall, and with that variance in his volume, I just can't trust him, so I would sit him. On the Broncos side, the Eagles' rush defense is 4th best against opposing. The Eagles' rush defense is 4th best for opposing running backs. So I'm definitely starting Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. I think both are good to start. The only receiver I would trust is Jerry Jeudy. The rest of the receivers, including Sutton, Patrick, and I can't pronounce that name. Okwegman, I can't even say his name. They're all at 5 targets per game or less right now. You just can't start them. They're just not going to be good for fantasy. So just know that. Now, moving on, let's get to the blowouts. So again, these are the games where one team's going to be great, one team's going to be terrible. So start the players on the great side and avoid the players on the bad side. First one, Buffalo at the Jets, the Sunday early game. Believe it or not, the Jets are actually 7th best against opposing wide receivers, but I'm thinking this might be the case because their run defense is literally the worst in the league. And so other teams can just run on them. So that's what they do. They run on them, they drain the clock, and they don't need to pass that much. So I'm not sure how strong it actually is. So I'm not going to sit Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, or Sammy Watkins. I think they're all good to start. Josh Allen also should be good to go. They should all bounce back nicely from that really confusing game last week. What the heck happened that somehow the Jaguars were able to orchestrate a shutdown of this offense last week? I don't get that at all. Any given week it's the NFL, but anyway, I think they're all good to go. So Devin Singletary is also a start because, as I said, worst run defense in the league, so they're going to utilize him a lot. And Zach Moss is out with a concussion, so he's probably not going to play. The other guy who I think would be a good start would be Dawson Knox, but of course he has that broken bone in his hand. We don't know what his status is right now, but if he is a go, I would probably play him if you need a tight end for this week. On the Jets side, again, the Buffalo defense just probably the best in the league right now. And because of that, I really, really can't recommend any Jets players. Now, I know there have been some splash plays. Elijah Moore looked great last week. You've got Carter, and I suppose you could start him. I just think it's a bad start for all those guys. They have benefited the past 2 weeks from the fact that the starting quarterback has gone out with an injury, then the backup comes in, and the defense didn't game plan for the backup, so that's why they've been effective. I don't think you're going to see that this week. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. So let's move on. Next blowout game, Buccaneers at Washington. This is a Sunday early game. Of course, Buccaneers get awesome matchups across the board. Tom Brady, the Washington defense, number 1 for opposing quarterbacks. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown. The Washington defense is 2nd best for opposing wide receivers. Gronk is probably, hopefully starting. He gets a top 12 matchup. And Leonard Fournette, also a must start. I mean, really, Washington defense can't stop anything this year. So go ahead, start all those guys with confidence as if you weren't going to already. But I'm excited that hopefully Gronk, the back spasms he had last time, hopefully it doesn't happen again this time. I'm going to be starting him in a couple of leagues because I need the upside. I need the upside of the touchdowns. I need him to do what he did in the first 3 weeks of the season. On the Washington side, of course, the Tampa Bay rush defense is one of the best in the league. So Antonio Gibson is a very risky start, and we've seen that. So I would be inclined to sit him if you can. You might not be in that situation. I think Washington is going to try to attack Tampa Bay through the air. So I think Terry McLaurin and Ricky Seals-Jones are both good to start. I also like that it's a negative game script, so there's going to be lots of passing. And I think Tyler Heineke is going to be a good streaming option as he gets a top 10 matchup on this defense. So that should be pretty good for him. Next game, Saints at the Titans. And, of course, the Saints offense just stuck in the mud. They're just not that effective. Kamara is pretty much the only player that I recommend on any given week from this team, but just know he's facing a top 7 rush defense. So that's something to consider, although I think he's still going to be fine just because he gets so much volume through the air. I would sit Mark Ingram. I know he got a decent amount of usage last week, but again, this top 7 rush defense, I think the opportunities are not going to be there. The weakest point of the Titans defense is against wide receivers. They're actually number 1 for opposing wide receivers. So I think that Deontay Harris and Marquez Callaway are good flex plays if you need someone in that position. Now, on the Titans side, New Orleans is 5th best against the run. So I think that Jerry McNichols and Adrian Peterson are both sits this week. I don't like the opportunity for them. The passing defense is weak. The Saints defense is 4th best for opposing wide receivers. So A.J. Brown is a start. But I got to say, man, I am sitting Julio Jones because he's just not getting the volume. He's obviously been dealing with the hamstring. But even when he has not had that designation like last week, he only got 4 targets. You can't start a player that's only getting you 4 targets. And I got to say, man, the aging wide receivers, obviously Antonio Brown has been good when he's played, but he's been injured a lot. Julio Jones injured a lot. Marvin Jones not getting utilized. I really don't like drafting wide receivers over age 30, and it's because their bust rate is so much higher than it is for players that are under that age. So it's just part of my draft strategy, and I penalize wide receivers once they get over age 30. So I need to follow that strategy, though, because I do have Julio in one league. I've got Marvin Jones in like 5 of my 6 leagues because I thought he was such a value, and he has been just an extreme disappointment. Next game, Jaguars at the Colts. Jaguars, very reluctant to start either James Robinson or Carlos Hyde as the matchup is 2nd toughest for running backs. And I just find it impossible to recommend any Jaguars receivers because the volume is all over the place. Maybe the tight end if you need a tight end, but I can't recommend LaVisca. I can't recommend Marvin Jones, and the other guys. It's just a mess. Don't even bother with it if you can avoid it. I'm benching Marvin Jones in every league that I have where I can bench him. You just can't trust this offense. I don't trust this offense. On the Colts side, Colts seem to be getting better every week. They're doing great. They get great matchups across the board. Jonathan Taylor's an automatic start. Michael Pittman, automatic start. Zach Pascal is a decent flex option in PPR leagues. He's been getting pretty decent volume, 6 or 7 targets a week. So I think you can start him in those kind of leagues. Carson Wentz, great streaming option here. The whole team should be very productive. The one player I would sit is Nahim Hines. Again, boom bust all year. His volume has just been up and down, mostly down. He had a huge week last week, but just keep him on your bench. You can't trust that guy. If you want to play him, try some daily fantasy. Put him in that lineup. Next blowout game, Lions at the Steelers. So It's going to be a tough day for the Lions. Both DeAndre Swift and Jared Goff have bottom 10 matchups, so they got tough matchups. TJ Hawkinson should be fine, but I don't think I would trust any of the other receivers right now. It's a volume thing. It's a pretty decent matchup, so I guess if you're desperate, you could start one of those guys, but I would avoid it if you can. On the Steelers side, Najee Harris, automatic start. Deontay Johnson, automatic start. Pat Freiermuth is doing great. He's getting really good volume. I think he's gotten 7 targets each of the past 2 weeks. So go ahead and start him. He's good to go. I would sit Chase Claypool, though. Right now, he's only getting like 5 targets a week. And I know he's an explosive player, and he usually has big chunk plays, but it's just not enough for me to want to put him in there. I don't know why they're not getting him the ball more. He's so dynamic with the ball, but I think it comes down to that Roethlisberger can't really deliver those types of passes anymore. So anyway, I'd stay away from Claypool if you can. Final blowout game, Seahawks at the Packers. Now, this is under the assumption that Aaron Rodgers is not going to play. He can't even go into the Packers facility until Saturday. So I'm guessing it's going to be Jordan Love again. Let's talk about the Seahawks first, though. Russell Wilson has been cleared to play. So he's good to go. He's good to start. I would also start Metcalf and Lockett, despite the fact that they do have a tough matchup. And I think Alex Collins can also be started as a flex play if you don't have any other better options. I do not trust Rashad Penny. Just look at his history. You can't trust him anyway, but he only got like 7 touches last week. You can't start anyone that's getting that small of volume. Now on the Packers side, so I think the offense is going to be stuck in low gear again. I think Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon are both starts. They get a top 3 matchup, so they should be primarily working it on the ground. Of course, Devontae Adams is a start, but I don't think you can start anybody else on the Packers team. All right, so let's move on to gold mines. So gold mines, I got 5 gold mine games this week, so these should be great for fantasy. Again, these are the kind of games where both sides should be very productive offensively, and so there should be a lot of fantasy points available. The first gold mine game is the Thursday night game, Baltimore at Miami. The Miami defense is very generous. So you start Lamar Jackson as he gets a 7th best matchup. Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman get a top 3 matchup. I would sit Sammy Watkins right now because I'm nervous about his volume with Bateman becoming a bigger part of the offense. I think there's some downside risk there. And Mark Andrews and Devonta Freeman, perfectly fine to start. Middle of the road matchups, they should be fine. On the Miami side, Baltimore defense is not quite as imposing as it's been over the past few years. So there are some good matchups. Mike Gesicki gets a second best matchup for tight ends. Myles Gaskin gets a top 10 matchup for running backs. Jalen Waddle does have a tough matchup right now. It is a 9th worst as far as 9th toughest. But I'm still starting him because of the volume and because all the other receivers are injured. Again, we already know that Devontae Parker is out. So anyway, you got some good options there. Next one, Falcons at the Cowboys, early Sunday game. Who else was shocked by the Falcons could score 27 points against that really good New Orleans defense? That New Orleans defense has been solid this year. So they get a much easier matchup now against the Cowboys D. Kyle Pitts gets a 13th best matchup. Russell Gage, top 10 matchup. And Matt Ryan, I think, is a good streaming option as well. He gets the 6th best matchup. I would stay away from Tajay Sharp and Zacharias, as they both get a minuscule amount of volume. I mean, they're only getting like 3 or 4 targets. So you got to ignore those blow-up games that they have with a big chunk play. You can't count on that when they're only getting like 3 or 4 targets. It's just not enough volume. Cordarrelle Patterson has the toughest matchup. It's 11th worst, but I'm not going to sit him. You play him every week. Just play him. Now, on the Cowboys side, I don't know what happened last week against the Broncos. I mean, again, any given Sunday, anything can happen, right? They should bounce back strongly. They got great matchups all around. Prescott gets a top 5 matchup. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Dalton Schultz. It's just a middle of the road pass defense, so they should all be fine and productive. I would sit Michael Gallup. He is coming back off of IR, so we don't know what his volume is going to be yet, and he'd be a risky start anyway, just because he's always kind of appears to be the third wheel on the offense. Zeke Elliott, top 10 matchup, auto start. Next up, Vikings at the Chargers Sunday afternoon. So Dalvin Cook and Tyler Conklin both get top 10 matchups, and I think both can be started with confidence. Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are both starts, despite the fact that they have a tough matchup. You don't sit those guys. But I would sit Kirk Cousins. He faces a team that is top 4 against quarterbacks, so you got to be concerned about that. On the Chargers side, the toughest part of the Vikings defense is against tight ends. So I think Jared Cook is a sit. But most people are sitting him anyway. But outside of that, I think Herbert, Eckler, and Allen are starts. Mike Williams, who started out red hot this year, has only gotten 5 targets a game for the past 3 games, and that's just not enough. I need to see more before I put him back into my lineup. I would bench him, even though he has a really high ceiling, and he could have a blow-up game. But I'm just not trusting the volume that he's getting right now. I need to see him with more in order to be able to start him for fantasy. Really, again, this is a guy, start him for daily. If you're looking for a daily lineup, put him in a daily lineup, because obviously the blow-up potential is there, but I just don't think he's good for season-long fantasy. We got the Chiefs at the Raiders also. Now, I don't know what's going on with the Chiefs. I don't know what's going on with Mahomes, but I'm not going to sit the Chiefs. I'm not going to sit him. I'm not going to sit Hill. I'm not going to sit Kelsey or Darrell Williams, regardless of the matchup. Mahomes, it's going to be a tough day. Las Vegas is top 6 against quarterbacks, but Kelsey, top 3 matchup. They are going to focus this offense through Travis Kelsey. I think he should have a huge game, which is great, because I do have Kelsey in a few of my leagues, and he has been fantastic this year. On the Raiders side, Waller and Jacobs, the 2 best parts of the Raiders offense, get the best matchups. Great. Go ahead and start them. Hunter Renfrow gets the Chiefs are actually top 10 against the pass, but I think you can start him anyway because he's getting really good volume. He's getting like 10 targets a week. You go with that. You roll with those players. And I think Derek Carr is a great streaming option this week as well. I think, like I said, I think this should be a high-scoring game. It could just be a blowout. It could just be the Raiders just blow the Chiefs out, which would shock me. But hopefully the Chiefs can figure out what the heck's going on. I don't get it. Final fantasy goldmine game is the Monday Night Football game. We got the Rams at the Niners. Now last week for the Rams, Tennessee just made them look bad, and I'm just going to write it off as a bad game. This Niners defense is not nearly as tough as the Tennessee defense. So obviously, Kupp, Stafford, Henderson, Woods, all start. You start them. Van Jefferson has been averaging just under 7 targets a week for the past 3 weeks. So I think he's great as a flex play in PPR. So go ahead and start him there as well. Higbee had an amazing volume last week. He got 10 targets, but the Niners defense is actually toughest against opposing tight ends. They are top 10 against the position, so I would sit him this week. On the Niners side, Debo, Kittle, and Ayuk are all doing great right now. I think this is really taking the offense to another level. Start all of them. I think they're all good to go. The backfield is a bit of a mystery right now with Jeff Wilson being activated. He wasn't utilized last week. We don't know what his usage is going to be. I think Eli Mitchell is still a start. You can still totally start him, but I would not start anyone else in that backfield until we get more clarity as to what's going on. But that's it, man. That's it for the starts and sits. So if you have a question about any of these players or any other players for this week, just leave a comment down below. I always love to hear from you. And thank you for sticking it out, watching the whole thing. I do appreciate it. And again, if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button. So anyway, good luck in week 10. Hope things are going well for you. I had a great week 9. Hope that momentum carries on to week 10, and we can move on from there, and I can start to, secure those playoff positions, because I'm in playoff position in most of my leagues right now, and so I want to just kind of lock it down. The way you lock it down, you keep winning games. That's what you do. So anyway, good luck this week. Have yourself a great fantasy week, and I'll talk to you next week with the Week 11 waiver wire. Have a good one, everybody.